Mentally, I was ready for Granite Mountain. Physically, I wasn't even close. I was a pale, thin, 145-pound party hound. I had never run more than 2 miles in my life. I'd been a stoner for 8 years and a drinker for 6. I was detoxing off of heroin, and I could barely run a half mile without getting a stitch in my side. I thought fighting fires would be the hardest thing about joining Granite Mountain. I was wrong. There would be days in the coming months when my buddies and I would close our eyes and pray for a fire just so we wouldn't have to go through the gut-wrenching training that Eric had designed for us. I was the last rookie to be hired that season. There were 4 other guys who'd been training for a week already and had already started to bond with the veterans. My first week, I had a feeling I was trying to sneak one more Oreo into the package, and that Oreo didn't want to fit. I was the man on the outside. Besides that, I'd known a couple of the guys casually for years, and they had my number. They knew old Brendan from parties and brawls and high school gossip. And they weren't buying the new one. A couple of them told me straight up that they were going to try their damnedest to get me to quit. They thought I was a punk. No one expected me to last a week. The first day I did part of my PAC test with a full-time veteran named Clayton Whitted, a strong Christian man who'd already passed the test but had volunteered to do it again, so I'd have someone there to motivate me. The PAC test measures muscle strength, endurance, and aerobic capacity. Basically, it's a test to see if you can handle the job physically, and the requirement is to finish a 3-mile hike with a 45-pound back in 45 minutes. We did the test on flat ground. I was wheezing from the get-go. I finished the hike with about 2 minutes to spare. Not good. Clayton was waiting for me. "That was a bitch," I said. "That," Clayton replied, "is about the easiest thing you'll do as a hotshot." I didn't believe him. I should have. Day 2. I showed up at the station early, and by 9 a.m. we were off on a training run. PT was next, physical training to build us up for the days we'd be fighting a fire for 14 or 16 hours in the middle of nowhere with no one coming to relieve us. It was hot as hell, creeping up toward 100 degrees. We got into the buggies and drove to the Brownlow Trail near Pioneer Park in Prescott. I got out of the buggy and thought, oh no, there wasn't a shade-giving tree anywhere in sight. You could see the heat wave shimmering 2 feet off the ground. We're gonna roast, I thought. I put some chewing tobacco in my cheek and tried not to think about it. We started running, making a tramping noise on the packed dirt. The trail was fairly flat, which I was thankful for, but it was still brutal, full of switchbacks and bordered by pollen-bearing bushes. One of the things I'd hidden from the group is that I was asthmatic. For years, I'd used an inhaler. One look at that brush and I could feel my lungs twitch. I'd never been much of a runner, and now I was trying to keep up with a bunch of guys who were in hella good shape. It felt like I'd caught a refrigerator on my back. 2 miles out with 5 more to go, I felt someone behind me. I looked back. It was this veteran, Chris McKenzie. He was a black-haired guy with tattoos and a big mustache, and right now he had a pissed-off look on his face. "Dude, pick it up," he yelled. Guys were passing me on the right, just blowing by me like I was using a walker. And they were the new guys, too, rookies like me. I swore at each one under my breath, "Motherfucker, I will get you back for this." I was about ready to topple over from the heat and sickness. My blood was beating in my temples. I turned back around and ran faster. We ran mile after mile, the dust floating up and choking me. I was gasping for breath, and I could see a gap forming between me and the guy ahead of me. Bad news. "Come on, Brendan, stop bitching and move." My body was drained. Just lifting my legs was an agony. Getting them to move faster was not going to happen. Just then I heard someone running up behind me. It wasn't a jogger. It was Eric. The man had steel springs for legs. He could run all night if he needed to. I felt a wave of anxiety. Is he going to let me go right now? Did I blow this already? To tell the truth, some part of me was half hoping this was the case. My lungs were shredded and my legs were screaming. If he let me go, there'd be less shame in leaving. Eric fell in beside me. He didn't say a word. We ran through the Arizona backcountry in silence, my nervousness growing, the two sides of me debating whether it was better to be fired or keep going. As we approached the last mile of the run, I had to slow down even further. My legs felt like they were going to lock up on me. I was embarrassed, the breath coming out of my mouth in ragged bursts. Eric was barely breathing hard. Get over it and fire me now, I thought. Or maybe I should just quit and save some face. I was about to tell Eric I couldn't run anymore, that I was just done. Then he leaned over. "If you give up on this run," he said quietly, "you're going to quit on your daughter every day of your life." I finished the run. After we stopped, I put my hands on my knees and wheezed. My lungs felt like they were full of steel confetti. I didn't even know lungs could hurt, but they did. Eric was standing, barely breathing hard. He took a swig from the water bottle. "All right, guys, push-ups." He said, "What?" I whispered to the guy next to me. The guy ignored me and dropped to the ground. I felt bright pain on my forehead, but I got down on my knees and got into the push-up position. Eric was counting out. My arms were shaking. It was a full hour of calisthenics. The other rookies were in better shape. They'd gotten through their first week and were already starting to get conditioned. I'd basically come off the party circuit straight into Marine boot camp. I made it through the calisthenics and then the run back to the trucks. At times I was half walking. Chris continued to harass me, snarling about how I was fucking up the crew. Man, that guy hates me, I thought. We got in the buggies and drove back to the station, covered in sweat. We got out and collapsed against the side of the building, sitting with my back to the coagulated metal, chugging water. The ground was cooking hot. I felt like I weighed 6 ounces, and a good breeze would pick me up and carry me away. Someone sat down next to me. It was Chris McKenzie. He leaned back and looked up at the sky. I tried not to watch him. We were silent for a couple of minutes. Finally, he spoke up. "Why don't you just quit?" he said. I didn't understand why he was dogging me, but I wasn't giving in. "Not fucking happening," I said. Chris acted like he hadn't heard me. "You're slow. In fact, I've never seen anything as slow as you. You look like a gazelle, but you run an 11-minute mile today. 11 fucking minutes. I hadn't realized I was being timed. Damn. No offense, dude, but you run like you weigh 300 pounds. You're wheezing. You can't carry your weight. You're going to be a liability to every guy out there when we really get out fighting wildfires. Is that what you want?" I closed my eyes and tried to block out the sound of his voice. I thought of Michaela. I tried not to think of smashing Chris right in the face, which is what I really wanted to do. I felt if I opened my mouth, we were going to fight, and I couldn't lose this job. Chris leaned in toward me. "So let me ask you that question again. Why don't you just fucking quit already? You're never going to be a hotshot." I took another sip of water and waited for him to leave. Finally, with a snort of disgust, he did. I watched him go, feeling more alone than I had in months. What if he's right, though? What if I get out there and can't hack it and someone dies because of me? How's that going to feel? That was just the morning. In the afternoon, we went and fought a simulated fire. The exercise had 2 objectives: teach the rookies like me what they were doing out there and work on fuel breaks. A fuel break is a strip of land that's been cleared for fire fuel. If a fire comes roaring across terrain, a fuel break is supposed to stop it or at least slow it down. Eric set out different colored flagging to represent a small fire. The green flag might be the eastern flank, the red flag the western flank, and so on. He was teaching us how to see a fire, how to get its size and its shape into our head so we could fight it. So in a way, we could outthink it. If we knew the shape of the fire, the fuel it was consuming, the terrain it was on, and the weather it was driving it, we should have an idea of how to kill it. But that was way above my pay grade for now. That first day, was brute labor. Some guys took their chainsaws and started cutting brush while their partners hauled it off to a safe distance. This is called swamping. I was part of the dig team, using my Pulaski tool to root out the last of the vegetation from the fire break. The Pulaski was a double-headed tool that had both an axe and an adze, which is a kind of narrow shovel. The thing had been invented by a forest ranger named Edward Pulaski 100 years earlier. It just showed how being a hotshot hadn't changed that much in a century, which wasn't the most encouraging thought. It was still a few men against a fire with only a couple modern tools. I thought I'd worked my ass off doing day labor. I dug ditches, installed fence posts, and all that before, and I'd held my own, but the pace Eric maintained was unbelievable. The guys were digging like the fire was 20 yards away and getting closer. There was an urgency that I'd never been a part of. "Let's go! Pick it up!" Jesse called. The heat, the brutal work, the yelling. Is this really the job? I thought. And this was just a trial run. This isn't even real. I'd imagined something different. I knew more about structure fighting where you're mostly hauling hose, but this is like building a house or something. Clearing the land, digging the roots out. It was work. I thought of Tony Sika and his telling me about being a hotshot. That son of a bitch, I said to myself. He was like the recruiter who tells dumb young kid about how the Marines get all the girls, about the R&R and exotic places and buying a big lifted truck with your first check, and forgets to mention the drill sergeant and getting your ass shot at. The guys worked without a break. The job was nonstop. You just kept hustling until your shift was over. I thought, I'm sorry, boys, but I'm going to have to sit down. I didn't, but I wanted to. Chris saw me taking a little breather. Out drinking last night, Rook? He yelled, not in the friendly way. I shook my head. I wish I had that excuse, but didn't. I couldn't picture the fire. There were going to be days when the temperature was hotter because of the blaze bearing down on us, and I didn't know how I was going to get through it. It was near 100 degrees already. What would it be like when flames were a hop, skip, and jump away? My feet were numb and my mouth was parched, but I worked my ass off. By 4 p.m., I was nuked. Thank Christ it was a Friday. If the next day had been a work day, I doubt I would have made it out the door. I went home that night and just collapsed in my bed, not even bothering to shower. I had all weekend to rest up. I spent most of it in bed. I didn't even want to think of a full week of training. My body was sore and brittle. I staggered to the bathroom and then went back to bed. As painful as it was, I never thought of quitting. The guys who washed out of Granite Mountain had a tradition. They didn't walk into the station and resign to Eric. That would have been too humiliating, like failing manhood. Instead, rookies drove down 6th Street late at night, hauled their gear out of their trucks, and threw it over the station's back fence. They were too ashamed to face the hot shots. No way that was going to be me. On Monday morning, I pulled my shirt on, feeling like I was dislocating my shoulder, and thrust my leg into my pants like a senior citizen. I looked at myself in the mirror. Are you sure you want this? Yes, I wanted it. I drove to the station, walked in, and said hey to the guys in the locker room. No one said anything, just nods, at best. After a quick briefing, we got in the buggies and went out right on the trail. When we lined up, I saw Chris fall behind me. This is bullshit, I thought. I'm going to lose it and crack this man right in the mouth. I was even slower than I had been on the first day. Every tendon in my legs felt like it had been sanded down, leaving the nerve endings exposed. The stiffness lasted for a mile. Then I felt heat rippling up through my thighs, the wind waves of pain. Sweat was pouring down my face. Someone was charging up behind me. I stumbled and nearly fell to the ground. I heard Chris's voice. What the fuck, Rook? I could feel my Irish temper burning. Short fuse. On any given Friday night, I would have turned around and it would have been on, but I had to control myself. I straightened up and staggered ahead. Mile after mile, I could feel Chris getting more and more furious behind me. Later, I would learn more about him. He was from Southern California and had been a hotshot there. He had the pedigree. Engine work, helicopter work, seen every kind of wildfire. Cali has the oldest and the baddest crews in the country because they have the big fires and the big populations, and they have a tradition. So they've always set the standard for the nation. Cali guys don't tolerate bullshit, and maybe Chris, seeing a fellow expat on the trail, was doubly disgusted. Not only was I a disgrace to hotshottin', I was a disgrace to SoCal hotshottin'. I was making his ass look bad. Cali crews have a make or break attitude. They grind rookies until they snap or until they find a reason to like them. And one thing was for sure, Chris McKenzie was finding no reason to like me. Get off this trail, Rook. Fucking deadweight. Move, bitch. No one on Granite Mountain wanted me there. They weren't going to risk their necks to help me. Why should they? Case in point, my inhaler. I'd gotten one because I'd known we'd be out in the wilderness, and I didn't want to have an asthma tech out there. At the station, it was easy enough to hide, keep it in a pocket or in my locker, or take a quick shot when no one was looking. But out on the trails, that's hard to do. There were a couple times I had to use it. I literally could not breathe. That afternoon, a hotshot named Jesse Steed walked over to me. Hey, Brendan, do you use an inhaler? I felt caught and a little embarrassed. How did he know? Someone must have told on me. Yeah, I do. You got asthma? I nodded. Listen, are you going to tell Eric? I don't care that you have asthma, Jesse interrupted. I care that you hid it from us. We're here to support you, Brendan. Seriously, what the fuck were you thinking? I shrugged. Just someone would find out and I'd lose my job? If you got a problem, especially a problem that affects the crew, we need to know. We'll help you all we can, but you've got to trust us. I took the inhaler out. I'll throw this away then. I meant it. I'd rather take the risk of having an attack out in the woods than lose the job. Jesse shook his head. That's not what I'm trying to tell you. Keep it. Stay healthy. But don't keep things we need to know secret. I nodded and stuffed the inhaler back in my pocket. I looked around, wondering who'd blown me in. But it was my fault, really. I didn't have enough trust in anyone to admit I had a weakness. Addicts keep secrets. They lie. That was the code I knew. That night, the pain in my body was so intense I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned. I'd gone to bed at 10 p.m., but at midnight I was still staring at the ceiling. I had to be up at 7, and if I didn't get any sleep, there was no way I was completing training. Most people who detox from drugs do nothing for a week. I was doing it by working my ass off. My body was crying out for some relief. You can do this, I said to myself. You're worthy of being on this crew. Do not give up. The desire to be part of this brotherhood, to have a chance at a new life right in front of me, was overcoming my craving for drugs. I'd beaten my drug addiction, and it would never come back. We ran endlessly all over Prescott. People who were out hiking had no idea who we were. Some of them thought we were a soccer team training for a tournament. Some locals would be like, hey, thanks, what you're doing out here. But nobody really thinks about hot shots until they see a wildfire on the evening news, and even then we're hidden from the high timber, just doing our jobs. Those first 2 weeks, one of the full-time veterans was paired up with me to make sure I didn't run off a cliff or collapse. These guys, I didn't know all their names yet, knew how to get inside your mind, but unlike Chris, they were actually trying to help me, getting me to fight for the job. You done, McDonough? You had enough? No, sir. You look like you just want to give up, Rook, to go home and grab a beer. No one's going to hold it against you, dude. Do you want to go home? No, sir. I asked myself, why are these guys trying to break me? They were searching for my weak spots, and when they found one, my druggy past, my fucked up family life, they pressed it until it was numb. These guys want to know my deepest, darkest fears. Why? To use them against me? By Thursday, I was feeling awful. My body was worn out. I was questioning whether I'd be physically able to even get through training, never mind a wildfire. We headed to Brownlow Trail for a run. I quickly dropped back to the end of the line. I was wheezing along, trailing far behind the other guys, even the other rookies. Chris didn't bother to hassle me anymore. I was like he'd given up on me. Why waste the time on a rookie who isn't going to make it? Weirdly, I almost missed his abuse. At least before, I had the feeling the other guys saw me as a threat to the crew. Now they'd written me off.